So on the podcast today, I'm joined by Simon Dingle, who's known or been a communications consultant, podcaster, product manager, and entrepreneur. So welcome.
Hi, Darren. Thanks.
When I first came across you, I think was around when you were on Tech Tech Talk on 5FM, which was quite a few years ago. Um, but how did you get into the tech industry, and has it always been a passion for you?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. From a since being a kid, I suppose one of my earliest memories of it was my dad bringing home an Intel 8086 when I was still a little kid and starting to play games on that old monochrome orange monitor and just being completely fascinated at what was happening in the computing space. And then taking my dad's computers apart and rebuilding them again myself. And very early on, I was playing at a friend's house, and this was in the days where you'd sort of, if you wanted to carry a computer with you, you'd have to you'd have to put together like 50 kilograms worth of hardware because even laptops back then weren't really a reality yet. But we were at my friend's house, and him and his brother both had computers. This is a little bit later on, so they're probably 286s or something. And I said to him, like, let's plug the parallel. We had a parallel port cable. I was like, let's plug the parallel ports into each other and then play Space Quest, and we'll both be Roger Wilco in the world. And my friend was like, that won't work. And we were like, I don't know, I was probably 11 or 12 years old, so I had no idea that that wasn't possible. Um, but it just made sense to me that computers should be linked together and that you'd be able to play games together then and do stuff. And so, 4 or 5 years later, when the internet arrived in South Africa and I convinced my parents to get me a dial up modem and a connection, it was just this mind blowing thing. Like, finally, the computers can speak to each other now. And my fascination with networking just took off from there. So I've just always been fascinated by networks, human networks, how we connect with each other, whether it's online using digital environments or whether it's offline in the real world, through commerce, through communications. That's really been the passion and the fascination, which then took me through open source software and working in the space, and then into today where my primary focus is in fintech and predominantly with cryptocurrency.
And one of your new ventures in that is Lettuce. Would you mind explaining a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we've got a company called Invest Capital, and there's a number of things we do. We partner with Binance, which is the world's biggest cryptocurrency exchange by volume. We're a partner for them behind the scenes, so we do some work with them all over the place. But Lettuce is an app we've developed. It's still a beta, so it's very early days. And essentially, what it does is bring all of your investments together into a single app to track your portfolio. But what we're building towards is an open finance platform. Our primary markets are in Europe because there's very mature regulation there for open banking and finance, that compels financial institutions to open up their user accounts via API. So we think there's an opportunity for us to do something over the top in the financial world, the same way that companies like Facebook and Netflix were able to do things over the top in the telecommunications world, because the same dynamics that were introduced to telecoms by net neutrality are being introduced now to banking and finance by open banking. So it's an incredibly exciting time for us to be building something like that, but it's very early days.
That's very interesting. And one of the other things I have picked up from you is cryptocurrency that you've mentioned previously now. Um, what has your involvement been with that? And yeah, what is your take on cryptocurrency? I think you're quite a big advocate for it. Initially I was a big advocate for it, but a bit of skepticism around it has set in. But I do like the idea of it being or decentralizing away from banking or traditional banks. Um, but yeah, I just wanted your thoughts.
So I first heard about Bitcoin from my friend Justin Spratt in 2010. And that led me to Google and finding the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper and reading it. And to be honest, not understanding everything the first time I did, but still having my mind blown. In 2011, I got seriously involved. I compiled the Bitcoin core software on my laptop, started to mess around with mining, which already then was pointless on a normal computer, but just to get my head around it. And started engaging with it. I used to write a technology section or edit a technology section for FinWeek magazine back then. And I actually wrote a cover story for FinWeek in 2011 on Bitcoin. Um, and then I started working directly in fintech in 2012. I joined Christo Darthel, who was the founder of 2020 Bank in South Africa back in the late 90s. Um, he started a new company back in 2012 called 227, and I was on his founding team. But after that, with some product management experience under the belt and starting to, sort of get my feet wet in the fintech space, I joined the team of a company called Bitex, which was also just starting up then. So I was, I think, the fifth or sixth person through the door at Bitex, and built with that team one of the first cryptocurrency exchanges in emerging markets, which later rebranded to a company called Luno. Um, so I was there for the first sort of quarter, year and a half, too, and then I left just after or just as they were doing their Series A, to go and join a company in the UK called Curve. And then just after that, I was approached by a publisher in South Africa by the name of Tracy McDonald. This was probably around 2016. And she said, look, there's a lot of interest in cryptocurrency right now. I think it's time for somebody to write a book about this. Would you be interested in doing that? And that seemed like quite a novel challenge. So I wrote a book called In Math We Trust, which was published in 2018, early in 2018, if I have my timeline correct. So that's been my involvement. Now, of course, I've got Invest Capital. We've got 3 or 4 projects in the cryptocurrency space. One of them is working with Binance to help them launch new markets and fiat gateways in those markets. And I have been an advocate all along. Haven't experienced any of the doubt or skepticism that you have, and still think that this has only just begun.
And do you think that there's going to be a movement for maybe traditional businesses to taking payments and cryptocurrencies in the near future? I know Amazon was, they said they were going to start taking Bitcoin. I don't know if that has come to fruition as of yet. I don't think it has.
I don't recall Amazon ever saying they would. There were ways to buy Amazon gift cards using Bitcoin from a few places, and there still are. Traditional business is involved. Microsoft is very actively developing in the blockchain space. They've accepted Bitcoin as payment on the Xbox Store for quite a while. Steam used to accept Bitcoin. They turned off Bitcoin payments a while ago. Starbucks is another company that's looking very seriously at the space. They're also part of the consortium behind Backed, which is a company that developed a securities platform for Bitcoin and is soon launching a digital asset custodial wallet for mobile. The other companies in the Backed consortium are Microsoft, ICE, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, Intercontinental Exchange. They are sort of the leading party in the Backed consortium. So traditional business is already super involved. Of course, Jack Dorsey, who's the CEO of Twitter, is also the CEO of Cash. The Cash app in the States is the number 1 fintech app on the planet. And you can buy and sell and use Bitcoin to pay in the Cash app alongside conventional banking with a Cash card, etc. So it's already happening. What we need is more merchants to be interested in accepting Bitcoin, because that'll be the real tipping point for Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. We're starting to see that happen slowly but surely, especially now. As we're recording this, we're in the middle of COVID-19 panic around the world. Markets have been upended, and Bitcoin is pretty much the only asset that's been up in the last week. So people are now starting to get the message loud and clear about deflationary currencies. I mean, the US has just minted $4.5 trillion. They're probably going to mint another $2 trillion before this is all over, massively devaluing that currency and basically making the point that they can have infinite money if they just print more, which is a terrible idea. So the message is now starting to get through. What merchants are starting to understand as well is that one of their biggest expenses in payments is the fees they pay to credit card networks, or to card networks rather, to Visa, Mastercard, and American Express, etc. Um, those fees are fairly exorbitant, and if they switch to taking cryptocurrency, they could cut those fees down so low that you could basically say they were zero. And in the Bitcoin space, there's the Lightning Network, which is a second layer protocol for scaling Bitcoin payments. That's fast, stable, secure. The fees are unfairly low. And I suspect that in the coming months and years, we're going to see more and more merchants accepting Lightning payments on the Bitcoin network. It's also something that is built into the Cash App. There are going to be other payment providers starting to accept it. And we're starting to see big banks get involved as well. So here in South Africa, and Investec has announced that they will soon be launching services for storing digital assets. So you can well imagine being able to store Bitcoin in your Investec account in not too long. The other banks who have woken up and smelt the coffee will start doing the same thing. And we're going to see a big separation between the banks that get it, like Investec, and the ones that don't, like FNB. And I suspect there's only one kind of bank we'll be talking about in 10 years from now, and that's the banks that do get it. So, sorry, that was a very long winded answer to your question, but there's a lot happening, and I do think traditional business is waking up now.
It's really exciting. I do think we are moving in that direction that you see it going. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all turns out. But I definitely think it will be a better system once it all is yeah put in place. Do you think the volatility of the cryptocurrency is one of the off-putting factors that or reasons why corporates and that aren't adopting it as quickly kind of thing at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. Price volatility is very scary for people who haven't been exposed to it before, but it also, there's a lot of uncertainty in cash flow for businesses dealing with volatile currencies, etc. So, unfortunately, that volatility is also par for the course with, a new financial network like Bitcoin. But you just have to look at the price performance over the last 10 years to see that if your time horizon is long enough, volatility on Bitcoin ceases to be a problem because it always ends up being worth more than it was, this time 3 years ago. Um, that's not entirely true now because 3 years ago was 2017. Although we're early on in 2020, I still think after the Bitcoin halving later this year, we might see a return to all-time highs, and then Bitcoin will definitely, start setting new all-time highs. So the curve, if you look at it, if you zoom out long enough on the timeline, is always up and massively so. You're dealing with a system where the monetary policy is set by algorithms and can't be messed with. And you've got finite supply that's precisely metered. So I think Bitcoin will always be deflationary. I think it'll always go up in price. Yes, volatility is a problem if you look at it from day to day, but it's absolutely not a problem if you zoom out to 1, 2, 3 years.
That's also good to hear. Maybe in closing, obviously you are a busy man, a lot of projects on the go. How do you find balance in your life when it comes to the mental and physical, emotional side of things?
Um, yeah, it's an interesting question. So I guess it's not something I spend too much time thinking about because it's almost a permanent preoccupation. It's always there in my mind. Um, I started meditating a long time ago. I didn't find any meditation classes or methods that worked for me. So I sort of cobbled together my own discipline, which is massively effective. Um, and I've gotten it down to just a sort of a second nature exercise that I can dust off whenever I need it. So I don't meditate every day. Um, but I found that the benefits of meditation or some of the states that I sort of got to in my own personal discipline um, have sort of become almost permanent now, which is quite interesting. But it's also a very personal thing, and like it almost makes me feel like a bit of a douche to talk about it because it's really to me such a personal thing that it's almost impossible to put into words for other people. And so, I'm also no expert. I would leave it up to the Sam Harrises of the world to help people learn how to meditate and look after their mental health. But I think I still have a lot of work to do. It's an ongoing battle in a way. That's sort of what it means to be human. um, but yeah, I'm not sure that's an answer to your question, but that's sort of my take on it.
No, yeah, I like that answer. I think a lot of time I think as well habit plays a big part in it. I'm reading the book Atomic Habits at the moment. Forgot the author's name, James Clear, I think it is. Um, and yeah, you kind of, or you create these kind of habits, whether it be meditating, that it becomes so autonomous that you kind of don't, yeah, you just do it kind of thing.
Yeah, and I suppose that's we're human beings, and that's how we learn. And especially, yeah, in the West, we have this crazy idea because we believe in things like following your heart and passions, and we put the cart ahead of the horse, and we think we'll find something we love, and then we'll get good at it. Where in reality, and this is something that in the Oriental world is more prevalent in places like Japan, especially. There's more of an understanding that you have to get good at something before you enjoy it. So it almost doesn't matter what you pick. When you're good enough at it, you'll enjoy it, and you'll enjoy it because it becomes second nature. Like nobody enjoys, a sport like, let's pick a sport, golf, I guess, before they get good at it. I don't know if anybody enjoys golf because I never have, um, but eventually you get so good at it that you're not really thinking about your swings. It's a very fluid thing. You've got that kind of flow state, um, and then you start enjoying it. But then it's also something you can do reflexively, and I think that a lot of mental health is part of that as well. I tend to be very impatient, and I've got some hot buttons. I don't lose my temper easily, but when I do, it's nasty. And there's some things that just pound that button, and you sort of have to teach yourself to become mindful in those moments and think about your responses. Instead of feel and react, you think and do. And that's a practice. And once you get good at that practice, I believe, like not thinking about your golf swing, you don't have to think about your response anymore. you know your mind just becomes sort of reflexive at going, okay, breathe, think. They've pushed the button. What were their intentions? We don't have to lose it now. um, and that's just practice, I suppose, like anything else. Anyway, what's your opinion? What are some of your practices?
I think my morning routine is probably what is most important to setting up my day because I wake up earlier or quite early, but ensure that I have generally half an hour, 45 minutes basically to myself where I can just, yeah, sit on my phone, make a cup of coffee, yeah, either read a Bible verse or something, read an interesting article or something like that. I also enjoy the Stoic kind of readings and that. And that kind of sets out my day just from that. If I'm in the right headspace and ensure that uh, I'm calm, thinking clearly, have a to-do list ready, and have got maybe the day planned out. I know what I'm doing. I think that's kind of what kicks me off and ensures that um, yeah that my day doesn't run awry. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, so the morning sort of grounds you. There's that saying, "Own the morning,
Mm.
own the day."
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I've found the same, except that I've got zero self discipline. So to stick to any form of routine for me is almost impossible.
Yep, the routine part is difficult. It is difficult.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, thank you for your time. I appreciate your thoughts and opinions.
Cool, man. It was nice to meet you and enjoyed chatting.